while we were watching the film, I was trying to get myself into a hypnagogic state in preparation for my presentation. What I thought I would do with this talk is really just share some relatively random thoughts with you about the way I think about sound, and share my passion for sound and why I think of it as being profoundly capable of changing the way we feel about ourselves and our environment, internal and external environment. And my work is as a composer and also as an artist, and as Stephen mentioned, I work across many disciplines, but sound is my primary medium. And I want to begin by referring to these two sentences which feature in Steve Goodman's book Sonic Warfare, which is an incredible book if you're looking to sort of read about, thinking about sound and the materiality of sound. This idea of vibrational experience, he describes our interaction, our experience of listening, the act of listening, as vibrational experience. And I love this term because it reminds us that sound is nothing but vibration. It is the antithesis of matter. It's immaterial. It is energy that passes through a medium, material, but it is not material itself. But, in sort of paradoxically, it also seems to have, as he puts it, a surplus of feeling. And he described this surplus of feeling that we experience when we hear. And I want to sort of explore what I see as a sort of index or a line which can be drawn between vibrational experience on one side, on the left for purposes of presentation, and on the right, this kind of surplus of feeling which he describes. So for me, consciousness is a combination of sensation and cognition. And what's interesting about sound is it forces us to, I think it forces us to encounter sensation and cognition in a very interesting way. Sound is only perceptible in tiny little fragments which we experience sequentially. As we experience these tiny fragments of vibration, our consciousness transforms them from vibration, which is all they are outside our body, into cognition, into meaning. And this takes place over time. And the longer we cogitate a sound for, the more meaning it acquires. And the process by which this happens, I think, is really, really fascinating. It's the core of what fascinates me about the act of listening and what we can do with sound. It's almost as if outside our bodies, outside our imagination, our consciousness, sound is immaterial, but it becomes materialized in the acoustic space of our mind. And I often think about it in terms of a pop-up book as an analogy, which is two-dimensional when it's closed, and it doesn't promise a great deal. Obviously it promises the words that are contained within it, but it's such a surprise when you open a pop-up book. It explodes into these three additional dimensions. And for me, sound is rather like that experience. I've often thought about it as being a bit like a piece of coal, because when we listen, and the sound that we hear takes on this surplus of feeling, this meaning in our mind, it reminds me of the act of burning coal, where the light that you see that emerges from a piece of burning coal is actually the sunlight that grew the tree that became a piece of coal. So you're actually exploding the coal back into its constituent parts, into its light, into its smell, into its heat. And what I experience when I hear sound is not just sound, but I experience images as well when I hear sounds as well. So sound is almost sort of able to materialize itself, unpack itself in our mind, back into a multi-sensory experience. And we all see something completely different. challenge anybody not to see that. This is a recording that I took in China last year for the installation at Gatwick, which you have a 25% chance of seeing if you go to the North Terminal. So you have to fly to Lanzarote, or southern Spain. So as I mentioned at the beginning, there's this index, as I see, between sensation on one hand and at the other end, meaning. And this is a diagram I drew for some students who I was working with at the Royal College of Art earlier this year. And it was a sort of attempt at representing how meaning can sort of increase over time in the temporal dimension as we experience a sound. So over here on the left we have an x and y axis. The x is time, the y is meaning. And on the very left of this graph we have the sensation of sound, the very moment that we experience sound. We can only experience sound in the present. And we keep on experiencing it in the present. We never experience it in the past or the future. Moments later, though, our memory of the sound brings meaning to what we've just heard. First of all, an innate recognition of sound according to our earliest memories and perhaps our innate understanding of the meaning of the relationship between sound and materiality. And that can tell us something about our location with respect to space. It can locate us in an acoustic space and give us an understanding of where we are. And then as time moves on and we cogitate this sound, and this sound is passed from the sensation of our eardrums moving in and out into our auditory cortex, and it's processed, and relationships are made between that stimulus and other parts of the brain, it takes on more and more meaning. And that's the space, as I see it, in which language and interpretation can take place. So you could replace these two terms, the sensation and the cognition, with a sound like an auditory texture that you make with your mouth. In Vincent's films, we saw lots of sounds. There's incredible pneumatic sound in the last film. I was trying to work out what the source of that sound was. There were lots of noises being made, but they weren't necessarily intelligible. And then on the other end, cognitive end, you have the sound of your name, for example, which embodies a huge amount of meaning. And I'm interested, have been interested in the right-hand side, in representing space. The sound installation at Gatwick, for example, is a portrayal of the Yangtze River in China using 160 channels. And I've made lots of computer games which immerse people in sound, in a sound world, generating these images like the skylarks you heard just now. And that's the cognitive end. This end is where we experience sound just as vibration. And it's my belief and my interest that on this dark side, where no meaning exists, and we only feel sound, and where sound is akin to the feeling of putting a hand in boiling water and feeling the heat receptors in your skin, but not drawing your hand away because you don't know it's hot. In this side, it seems to me that it's possible, I'm interested in the possibility that we can transform, that we can translate between different sensory modalities. So we can actually translate between audio and image. And my interest in this comes from the fact that I'm a synesthete and I experience colour as sound and sound as colour. So when I look at things, I see, I hear a sound in my mind. And I want to finish by showing this project called Cines, which was an attempt to represent images which provoke me to hear things using an orchestra so that other people can see what I see when I hear a sound and hear what I hear when I see an image. And the project began by me looking around my world and identifying things outside my flat, all over London, all over the UK, on the internet, identifying lots of different things that stimulated a sound in my mind when I look at them. So all these forms create an auditory sensation in my mind, and they may do for perhaps 4% of the people in this room. And they sort of divide up into a taxonomy of things, visual sensations that produce sound. So we might have lines, we might have dots, we might have colours, we might have curves. And I attempted to create this taxonomy of all these experiences. I call them observed types of my synesthesia. And they broke up into colour, scale, size, the size of things can be mapped perhaps to volume or pitch of sound. Curves seem to be about resonance to me. Transients and dots seem to be about temporal things, little spots and spits of sound. And lines that I look at, fences, the slots in this wall, I can hear as rhythms. And then what I did is I created an orchestral score for a 35-piece string orchestra, which attempted to put down on the page the sounds that I heard when I looked at these different categories. And then I asked the orchestra to perform these. And I worked with two amazing visual artists who create visual systems which react to sound. What they did is they put 10 microphones in the orchestra, which picked up the sound of the different sections of the orchestra. As they played these crazy textures that related to scale, high-frequency texture, low-frequency texture, and colour, the microphones would take that sound, feed it into a graphical software system, and reanimate the sound back into images on a huge screen behind the orchestra. And I'll just explain those 4 movements of the piece. The first movement is an attempt to visualise and sonify, which is the other way around, the idea of scale and reverberation, so space. And what you'll see is a visual representation of reverb. The second was an attempt to get the orchestra to play the sounds I hear when I look at high-frequency texture, like sand and dust. The third was what I hear when I look at low-frequency texture, things like bark and rocks, or a ploughed field. And the fourth movement is about what I hear in my mind when I see colours. And for me, pure colours, primary colours, are pure tones, but mixtures of colours, or colours which aren't primary or related to primary, tend to be dissonant. So that movement is played largely on 35 tuning forks, which are all tuned to interfering frequencies. So this is a very, very short excerpt of Cines, which was performed in 2014 at the Roundhouse by the London Contemporary Orchestra.
few quick questions for Nick. If you do have a question, please pop your arm up and we'll bring a mic to you just so it can be recorded. You don't have to ask a question, no. Any thoughts?
Go on.
2. It's the prerequisite time for no one to look like they want to be first. Thank you so much, madam.
I was curious what your response to the images were, because you worked from images, you sonified them, and then they were retranslated again into imagery. So that's one part of it. And then I guess the second part would be, did you ever then respond to those images with another kind of another level of sonification?
That's a really interesting question, because I sort of, yeah, I'm afraid I might have got caught in an endless feedback loop to those images and stuck with the roundhouse, just going round and round and round. But yeah, no, very good question, because I chose to work with those two artists, visual artists, specifically because they visualise sound in exactly the way that I see it in my mind. So it was very, very satisfying to see it shown in that way. And but interestingly, they think the idea of synesthesia is quite ridiculous. So they're very anti this synesthesia definition. And what they like to think of is their ambition for the piece, and which became my ambition actually, was to create a sort of experience that was neither audio or visual. It was sort of something else, something in between. But their style, and it is style, is very, very much what I see in my mind.
Chat with you, that's okay.
Well, I'm just basically just curious about in what moment of your life, or if we can tell how old were you, when you can just basically have that be able basically to visualize this, and because sometimes it's not easy what you have in your mind, and just try to do what exactly basically we just show right now. That's one thing, and the other thing that I would say is I'm glad to be here today, because I've just been asking this question for, or at least in my mind, for a long time, and it's nothing I don't know how to say, but just because what I saw just makes sense in my mind right now. Basically because when I was a kid, I used to see many things, and now, as I said, it just makes sense. I couldn't just say or explain what exactly.
Well, in answer to your first question, it's I can only say when I first experienced this sort of connection, portal across the senses, and that's when I first listened to music on the move, which, believe it or not, prior to 1987 or something like that, it was not possible to listen to music on the move. And that's a paradigm shift, enabled me, to see lots of different things while I was listening. And there was a sort of correlation that I noticed between what I saw and what I heard that was really intriguing. And relationships seemed to emerge instantly that seemed to be more than coincidence. So actually I felt that what I saw, certain portions of what I was seeing, such as texture at a particular granularity, would be amplified by the music and vice versa. So it was when I got my Walkman, which was 1987 or thereabouts. Paradoxically, you need about 20 batteries to actually take it out of the house. But nevertheless, I did have that interesting experience, particularly in cars, things going fast. But just to speak to your second point, there are a lot of people who've said the same, actually, when they saw this performance. They sort of said, what's going on here? Yeah, what is this? Because I kind of think I feel it's kind of fits, but I'm not quite sure why. So yeah, welcome to Synesthesia Club.
Round of applause for Nick Brown, please. So our last presenter this evening is Maya Yantar, who's a multilingual and polysonic voice artist and opera director currently living in Ghent in Belgium. Her work spans the fields of performance, opera, poetry and visual arts, and her performances invite audiences to enter the field of the imaginary, of the inner world, exploring the inner stream, the shamanistic and the prophetic. Please, a round of applause for Maya Yantar.